You notice it before your mind finds a word for it. Not a castle. Not yet. Just a pressure in the landscape, a wrongness in the way the hill interrupts the horizon. The land rises as if it has been holding its breath for centuries, and finally decided to exhale stone. Walls appear slowly, thick and patient, pressed so deeply into the hill that it's hard to tell where earth ends and authority begins. The wind moves across the grass below, flattening it in the same direction it always has, the direction of boots, hooves, carts, and quiet obedience. From here, the stone looks eternal. From up there, you can feel it looking back. You start climbing because that's how this works. The path does not ask if you're tired. It curves upward lazily, smug with familiarity, polished smooth by generations hauling grain sacks that leaked dust into the air, firewood that bit into shoulders, and news that arrived already trembling. Fear travels light. The hill chose this place long before anyone pretended it was strategy. Gravity did the rest. Kings will claim credit later. As dusk thickens, smoke drifts down from hearths hidden somewhere above, threading itself through mist until the air tastes like damp soil and old iron. It settles in your lungs. Heavy but familiar, the smell of safety mixed with control. The stone holds warmth from the day, releasing it slowly, almost kindly, against your skin. It feels like mercy until you remember that warmth can also be containment. Shelter is never free. It just charges differently, before banners snap in the wind, before voices argue inside thick walls, before prayers echo or orders harden. The castle listens. It absorbs footsteps without comment. It remembers storms, sieges, boredom, and the long, aching hours when nothing happens except waiting. Night settles around the walls, careful not to disturb them. The stone does not sleep. It waits. The castle does not rise by will or miracle. It rises by bodies, yours included. Stone is cut from the nearby quarry with a sound that never quite leaves your ears, a sharp, dry crack that vibrates up your arms and settles behind your eyes. Each block is heavier than it looks, which is always the problem. Ropes bite into palms already thick with callus. Wood groans. Men grunt prayers they don't fully believe in, because belief helps when leverage fails. Days stretch thin, then fold into seasons without ceremony. Summer burns. Winter stiffens fingers until they forget how to bend properly. No one announces the passing of years. The work simply continues. The rhythm becomes its own religion. Lift, set, breathe, repeat. Dust clings to your skin, mixing with sweat until you smell like chalk and effort. Tunics darken permanently, stiff with salt. Voices echo briefly against open sky. Jokes shouted upward and lost immediately, swallowed by wind that does not care. At first, the walls rise unevenly, leaning just enough to make you nervous. Everyone pretends not to notice. Lime mortar dries slowly, inhaling the damp breath of the hill, cracking if rushed, punishing impatience like a moral failing. At night, you sleep beneath stars sharp enough to hurt your eyes, the ground unforgiving and honest. Your dreams are full of falling stone and towers that never quite meet at the top. You wake with your jaw clenched, already tired. No one alive will see this finished. Everyone knows that. And yet, you work as if completion matters personally, urgently. There is faith in that, not the loud kind, but the stubborn kind. Faith in weight. In patience. In the idea that shelter, once finished, might remember you kindly. The stones remember. They remember hands. They remember strain. They remember the silence that falls when work ends and no one has energy left to speak. Even centuries later, that effort lingers in every crack, every corner, a record of lives spent building safety for people who will never know your name. The gate is where the castle learns how to judge you. Not with words, with weight. Thick oak doors stand upright like something alive, banded in iron that has forgotten what softness feels like. Hinges groan when they move, a low, tired sound, like joints that have carried too much authority for too long. Chains clink with deliberate restraint, never hurried, never apologetic. You pause here without being told to. Everyone does. Your breath slows. Your heart finds a quieter rhythm. Inside is warmth, bread, fire, rules. Outside is mud that never quite dries in the future, that keeps changing its mind. The gatehouse smells like old wood soaked through with damp, stone that sweats in the cold. And food left too long near a fire, cabbage fat, regret. Watchmen lean where they always lean. Their eyes appear in narrow slits above you, measuring without enthusiasm. Posture, clothing, the way you hold your hands. Intent, if that can be seen at all. Names are spoken carefully here, like they might be dropped and broken. News travels faster than feet ever could, and suspicion walks beside it, never tiring. At dawn, the gates creak open just enough. Carts groan inward, wheels protesting under grain sacks and wool bundles that smell of sheep and damp fields. Life enters obediently. At night, the doors close with a sound that feels final, even if you know it isn't. Wood meets wood. Iron settles. Silence thickens. Torches flicker as if unsure they're still needed. The outside world fades quickly, like a story cut short. Once sealed, the castle breathes differently. Air feels closer. Sounds bounce back instead of escaping. Lives fold inward, shared, confined, watched. The gates do not just protect. They decide. And once they close, the castle holds its people the way a clenched fist holds a secret, firmly, possessively. Without asking whether it hurts, the courtyard sits at the castle's center like a steady pulse, open to the sky and unconcerned with ceremony. You step into it and feel the ground give just slightly beneath your boots, packed earth worn smooth by 1,000 ordinary crossings. Footsteps pass close and constant. Buckets scrape against stone with a sound that sets your teeth on edge. Chickens scatter indignantly, convinced every movement is a personal insult. No one apologizes to them. This is where life happens without guards or speeches. Exposed and repetitive and necessary. Children run in uneven circles, tripping, laughing, bleeding just enough to learn something, and then forgetting it immediately. Servants move through with practiced speed, arms full of bread still warm from the ovens, the smell soft and comforting, and gone too soon. Horses stamp and snort near the edges, patient but alert, eyes following everything. Above you, laundry flutters between towers, pale shirts and rough linens flashing briefly against gray stone. The castle's private life aired out for anyone. Who cares to look? The air smells of straw and smoke and damp walls that never quite dry. Voices rise to complain, to joke, to call someone back, then settle again into the day's rhythm. Time behaves differently here. It is not counted. It is felt. Meals arrive. Bells ring. Light shifts across the walls, marking progress without explanation. When rain falls, it gathers in shallow pools that mirror the sky in broken pieces. People step around them carefully, or not at all. At night, the courtyard empties. Sound withdraws. Moonlight spreads thin and indifferent across the ground. What remains are echoes and memory. Every ordinary moment lingers here, small, unremarkable, essential. Without ceremony, without thanks, this space keeps the castle breathing, high above the courtyard. Past stairs that narrow deliberately. Behind doors thick enough to bruise your shoulder if you forget their weight, lies the Lord's chamber. You feel the change immediately. The air is warmer here, heavier, held in place by stone and expectation. Tapestries line the walls, softening what would otherwise be unbearable. Wool and dye pressed into scenes of hunts no one here has time for. Saints who look calm about suffering, victories that have already begun to blur at the edges. They exist to remind the room what authority is supposed to feel like. Firelight moves constantly, licking carved wood and polished metal, turning still objects restless. The bed dominates the space, wide and high, layered with linen and fur meant to signal abundance rather than comfort. Sleep comes poorly here. It always does. Responsibility hums beneath every softness, a low vibration you can't ignore. Even rest feels supervised. Decisions are made in this room without witnesses, whispered into hands, sighed toward the ceiling, stared into existence through flame and shadow. Some of them will change lives. Most of them will simply delay collapse. The chamber smells of wax slowly surrendering to heat, of incense used sparingly, of old fabric that remembers other bodies, other rulers. The windows are small, cautious slits that admit light reluctantly, as if the outside world cannot be fully trusted. From here, the Lord listens. To footsteps moving where they should. To wind testing shutters like a persistent question. To the castle breathing below him, dependent and demanding. Power brings warmth. It also brings distance. Even surrounded by walls, servants, symbols. The Lord remains alone with the simplest, ugliest truth. Everything standing depends on him not growing tired at the wrong moment. The ladies' chambers feel different the moment you enter them, not freer, just quieter in a way that demands attention. The stone is still stone, the walls still close, but light behaves more carefully here. It filters through cloth and narrow panes of glass, landing on the floor in softened colors that never quite settle. Nothing is harsh. Nothing is accidental. Even the shadows seem arranged. Embroidery rests where it was last abandoned. Thread paused mid-thought, needle waiting with patient obedience. It will wait as long as it must. It always does. Voices stay low in these rooms, trained into gentler shapes. Women move steadily through their work, managing without spectacle, counting stores, measuring out herbs, remembering which child coughs at night and which servant lies poorly. Care is organized here, efficient and invisible. The air smells faintly of dried plants, warmed wool, and clean hands that never quite stop moving. This is where strength hides when it is not allowed to announce itself. Medicines are prepared. Letters are written and rewritten, each word weighed for consequence. Alliances are maintained through memory rather than force. Grief arrives and is folded away carefully, like cloth that must be stored, but not displayed. There is no space for collapse here. Only continuation. Chronicles rarely mention these rooms. They prefer swords and banners. But the castle's balance hums most clearly here, in this constant, attentive labor. The lady knows the household the way others know maps, every corner, every weak point, every mood shift carried in footsteps or tone. She listens more than she speaks. She holds things together by noticing them early. From these chambers, the castle is kept alive in ways no wall could manage, quietly, persistently, without expecting thanks. You learn the castle best where it pretends not to be seen. The servants' corridors twist behind walls and beneath stairs, narrow enough that shoulders brush stone without apology. They feel less like hallways and more like veins, necessary, hidden, never thanked. You move quickly here because lingering feels dangerous, like loitering inside something alive. Footsteps are trained into softness. Voices shrink themselves automatically. Candles gutter in passing drafts, flames bending as if eavesdropping. The air smells of damp stone that never dries properly and tallow that clings to everything it touches. It settles into hair, into skin, into sleep. Life here arrives in fragments. A mouthful of bread eaten standing. A laugh cut short because someone might hear it. Exhaustion folded neatly into habit until it no longer announces itself. You learn to rest while walking. You learn to think while scrubbing. You learn to disappear without actually leaving. Servants know the castle more intimately than anyone who owns it. They feel its moods in the temperature of walls, in which corners trap cold, in which hearths give more warmth than they should. They hear secrets pass through stone, carried carelessly by voices that assume no one is listening. They know which steps creak, which doors stick, which nights will be long. Knowledge here is survival, not power. At night, when the upper rooms finally surrender to sleep, the corridors stay awake. Fires are tended. Floors are cleaned of the day's evidence. Silence is guarded carefully, like something fragile. Lives continue in motion, unseen, unrecorded. Names fade quickly here, but presence does not. It lingers in worn steps, in door handles polished smooth by hands that never rested. Without these corridors, without the people moving through them endlessly, the castle would become what it pretends to be already: hollow stone. Impressive and dead. Food tells you what kind of day it will be before anyone speaks. Bells call bodies toward the great hall, and they arrive in their proper order, already knowing where they belong. Tables stretch beneath beams, darkened by years of smoke and stories no one bothers to repeat anymore. Bread is broken with practiced hands. Stew simmers long enough to forget what it once was. Cups are filled, emptied, filled again. The smell settles into your clothes: meat, grain, wood smoke, a hint of damp wool. It is comforting in the way routine can be comforting. It promises nothing beyond the moment. Hierarchy sits openly here. It doesn't bother hiding. Who eats where? Who eats first? Who eats what remains when conversation has run its course? Laughter rises in careful bursts, tested before being allowed to grow. Even joy knows its place. For some, plates are full and heavy, fat glistening in the firelight. For others, meals are brief negotiations with hunger, enough to quiet it, not enough to forget it. No one eats without awareness. Every bite carries a small calculation. Winter sharpens this awareness until it hurts. Stores thin. Portions shrink politely. Patience wears down alongside them. You feel hunger not as pain, but as a constant companion, sitting beside you, watching every spoonful. Food becomes more than sustenance. It becomes reassurance, leverage, discipline. Comfort and control share the same bowl. Servants move continuously, refilling what must be refilled, removing what must not linger. They eat later, elsewhere, quickly. The hall empties slowly, reluctantly, warmth fading as bodies leave. What remains is the knowledge that tomorrow will require the same careful balance. Food binds everyone here together, not by abundance, but by shared necessity. You eat because you must. You stop because you are told. And you carry the taste of it with you long after the hall grows quiet. Faith hides itself inside the castle the way breath hides inside a body, quiet, constant, necessary whether you admit it or not. The chapel is small, deliberately so, tucked into stone that has learned how to listen. Candlelight softens everything it touches, smoothing rough walls, forgiving imperfections. Wax pools at the base of tapers, thick and uneven, like time melting without urgency. Incense drifts upward in thin, patient lines, carrying hope spoken too softly to be overheard by anyone human. You kneel because the floor tells you to. Stone presses cold through fabric, reminding you where you are. Bells mark the day, not as hours but as interruptions, moments where labor pauses and humility is expected to arrive on schedule. Fear kneels beside gratitude here. They look similar from a distance. Both bow their heads. Both ask for things they cannot guarantee will be given. Illness, war, loss, these words hover unspoken in the air, familiar enough that no one needs to name them anymore. Even doubt comes inside. It removes its hat. It lowers its voice. Habit has a gravity of its own. You bow because everyone else does, because hope is contagious even when you don't fully trust it. The prayers are repetitive, worn smooth by use, but that is part of their appeal. Familiar words ask you to rest inside them for a moment, to let responsibility loosen its grip just enough to breathe. The chapel does not promise solutions. It offers structure. A pause carved into stone. A place where tears can fall without explanation, where silence is not suspicious. It absorbs everything without comment. Whispered bargains, clenched anger, exhausted gratitude. Long after voices fade, it remains, holding the weight of belief and doubt equally. Faith here does not shout. It endures. Violence never announces itself here. It waits. Armor stands along the walls like obedient ghosts, metal-shaped to human curves, but emptied of warmth. It catches the light without responding to it. You pass close enough to smell oil rubbed carefully into joints and seams. A sharp, clean scent that settles in the back of your throat. Weapons hang where hands can find them without looking. Blades dulled by peace, sharpened anyway. Habit is safer than hope. In the training yard. Strikes land with controlled force, wood on wood. Steel kissing steel and pulling back before it commits. The sound echoes up the walls and falls back down again, trapped like everything else. Sweat darkens tunics. Breath comes out loud and measured. Men learn early how to carry fear without letting it spill. They fold it into discipline, into posture, into the way they stand even when nothing is happening. Especially when nothing is happening, the castle participates. It always has. Walls lean at calculated angles. Towers watch without blinking. Narrow stairs turn attackers clumsy, thoughtful. Every stone has an opinion about survival. Even in peace, the place hums with readiness. You feel it in the way doors are barred before sleep, in the way torches are checked twice, in the way silence is never fully trusted. Sleep comes lighter here. You lie down knowing exactly where you would run if shouted awake. Dreams sharpen themselves on anticipation. In them, footsteps approach too fast. Horns sound too late. You wake with your heart already moving, already preparing. The castle protects. That is what it claims. But protection is never passive. It requires imagining violence often enough that it feels familiar. Readiness shapes the body. It shapes thought. And even on quiet nights with no enemy in sight, the steel waits, patient, oiled, certain that eventually it will be needed again. Illness does not arrive through the gates. It seeps. It slips between breaths and settles where stone cannot argue with it. A cough lasts one beat too long in a corridor. Someone pauses mid-step, hand pressed to a chest, smiling as if that will fix it. Fever follows quietly, bringing heat to rooms that should be cold, turning blankets into traps. The castle responds the only way it knows how, by folding inward. Doors close. Certain stairways are avoided. Voices lower themselves instinctively, as if sound alone might worsen things. Herbs are crushed into bitter pastes. Cloth is boiled until the air smells sharp and clean and desperate. Hands move from brow to brow, checking, counting, hoping warmth means recovery and not farewell. Prayers multiply, spoken under breath, spoken incorrectly, spoken to any saint willing to listen. Hope becomes a thin thing here, easily bruised. Stone walls stand firm, impressive, useless. They can stop arrows. They cannot stop breath from turning against itself. Death does not announce its arrival. It simply happens, usually at night, usually when exhaustion has finally convinced everyone to sit down. Morning reveals absence. A bed untouched. A cup still full. A corridor that feels wider than it should. There is no ceremony unless status demands it. For most, grief is quick, private, practical. Someone else takes over the work. Life insists on continuing, but it does so unevenly, like a body favoring an injured limb. The castle remembers. It always does. In rooms that stay empty longer than necessary. In paths no one takes anymore. In habits adjusted quietly, a door left ajar, a hand washed twice, a name not spoken. Illness leaves no monument, but its shape lingers everywhere, etched into routine, into caution, into the way people listen more closely to their own breathing in the dark. Winter does not attack the castle. It settles onto it slowly, confidently, like something that knows resistance is pointless. Snow falls without sound, piling against walls, softening edges, sealing the world smaller. The courtyard disappears under white, footsteps erased as quickly as they're made. Sound is muffled everywhere. Even voices seem to freeze before traveling far. Breath fogs the air inside and out, reminding you constantly that warmth is borrowed and temporary. Fires burn constantly now. They are never allowed to rest. Wood disappears faster than anyone admits out loud. Stores are counted, then counted again, then quietly worried over in the dark. Hands linger a moment longer near flames. Fingers crack. Skin stings. Movement slows because energy has learned to be careful. Every task costs more. Even standing still feels like work. Light fades early, retreating behind clouds and stone, leaving long hours to be endured rather than filled. The castle turns inward completely, becoming what it was always meant to be. Not impressive, not powerful, but necessary. A container for heat. A barrier against the sky's indifference. Nights stretch until they lose their shape. Stories are told not for entertainment, but for warmth. Prayers repeat themselves because new words would require effort. Silence settles heavily when voices run out. Sleep comes in fragments. Dreams blur with waking, filled with firelight and hunger and endless white. You wake often, listening to wind scrape along shutters, testing them patiently. Survival simplifies everything. There are no grand plans now. No ambitions. Only the next meal. The next morning. The slow return of light the castle holds. That is its final gift. Not comfort. Not certainty. Just endurance. Winter does not care who you are or what you believed. It only asks whether you can last. And here, inside thick stone and shared breath, lasting becomes the only story left to tell until even that grows quiet. And the cold learns how to wait. Celebration arrives like a crack in the wall, sudden, bright, almost suspicious. A feast is declared, and the castle responds as if surprised by its own ability to feel light. Tables are pulled closer together. Candles multiply until shadows retreat to corners, sulking. Music spills down corridors that usually carry only footsteps and warnings. For once, sound is allowed to roam. You feel it in your body before you name it, the loosening. Shoulders drop. Backs straighten. Laughter comes out too loud at first, unused to the air. Hands clap an uneven rhythm. Feet move without purpose beyond movement itself. The hall glows from within, firelight catching on faces made softer by relief. For a few hours, the castle stops bracing for impact. It exhales, food is richer tonight. Cups are refilled generously. Someone tells a story badly and is applauded anyway. Someone dances who absolutely should not, and no one stops them. Even restraint loosens its grip, though it never fully leaves. Fear watches from the edges, patient, but it is drowned out for now by music and voices, stacked on top of each other like warmth. These moments are rare enough to be precious. Everyone knows it. That knowledge sharpens them, makes them shine. You store the sound of laughter carefully, already aware you'll need it later. When the candles finally burn low and bodies tire, silence returns gently, almost respectfully. The castle settles back into itself, but something lingers, a faint echo in the stone, a reminder that joy lived here once, briefly, defiantly. Long after the hall empties, that memory stays. It will warm colder nights. It will soften harder days. Celebration does not last. It never does. but its release leaves a mark, proof that even inside walls built for endurance, life occasionally insists on being felt. Time does not rush the castle. It presses instead, patiently, the way water presses against stone until something gives without making a scene. You begin to notice the changes only because they refuse to hide anymore. A crack along a familiar wall that wasn't there last winter. A stair that groans differently underfoot, offended by age. Repairs become constant, less a project than a condition. Someone is always patching, shoring, promising it will hold a little longer. Power shifts quietly. Names change. Seals are replaced. Authority learns new handwriting. None of it arrives with the drama it once would have. The castle remains, of course, it always does, but its certainty thins. Commands echo longer before being answered. Corridors feel wider because fewer people move through them. Rooms are closed for now and then never reopened. Fires burn less often, and when they do, they are smaller, careful, as if conserving effort. Life inside grows quieter, not from peace, but from absence. Fewer voices overlap. Fewer footsteps argue with the stone. The courtyard empties faster at dusk. Laughter, when it appears, sounds surprised by itself. You feel the castle listening more closely now, as if it senses something it cannot quite name. It absorbs the changes without protest, the way it absorbed storms, illness, and fear. Stone is good at that. The walls do not complain. They have learned better. They simply hold what remains, habits pared down to essentials, routine stripped of confidence. The castle still stands, still shelters, still watches the land below. But the feeling has shifted. What once felt inevitable now feels maintained. And maintenance, you are learning, is just another way of admitting that nothing lasts without constant attention. Eventually, the leaving finishes. Not all at once. That would be too dramatic, but in stages so quiet they barely register. One last room is locked. One last fire is allowed to go out. One last set of footsteps decides not to return. The castle empties the way lungs empty after a long breath, slowly, reluctantly, until only air remains. Wind moves freely now through chambers that once held warmth and argument and sleep. It slips under doors that no longer close properly. Climbs stairwells without being told where to stop. Hums softly where voices once competed. Silence settles deep. Not the polite kind that waits to be broken, but the heavy kind that arrives to stay. Dust thickens. Moss begins its patient work, green fingers spreading across stone that no longer feels defended. Rain enters places it was once kept out of. Light behaves differently, stretching farther, touching walls that forgot what daylight looked like. The castle does not react. It has outlived reaction. It does not mourn. That is not its role. It remembers instead, in worn thresholds shaped by thousands of passing feet, in walls darkened where bodies leaned while waiting, in corners softened by years of breath. Every life lived here left something behind. Heat pressed into stone. Sound trapped in angles. Habits carved into movement. None of it disappears completely. It just changes form. At night, the castle feels larger than it ever did when full. Moonlight spreads unchecked across floors that once knew where not to fall. Wind carries no language now, only pressure and time. And still the walls hold. Cold, yes. Patient, always. They cradle centuries of human warmth without comment, like a hand that never learned how to let go. The castle rests at last. Not ruined. Not alive. Dreaming, perhaps, if stone can dream, layered with echoes that never quite fade. And as darkness settles once more around the hill that chose it, the castle keeps watch, doing what it has always done best, waiting, remembering, and standing long after footsteps decide they are finished.